many of you subscribe to or visit Mexico News Daily? Do you see this? You see this? Not too bad. Not too bad. Well, I'll tell you, it's my go-to every day. Absolutely. Mexico News Daily is my source for English language news of Mexico, of all of Mexico. It's invaluable to me for my understanding of my new country. Okay, invaluable. The coverage is not only politics, but is business, is culture and lifestyle, travel, food and drink. I mean, I can go on and on. I went back and looked at the email from yesterday, and the headline was Mexico, the 51st U.S. state. Anyone have an opinion of that one? Okay, so I really suggest you go to the website. There's the QR code if you want to. It is well worth the small price of subscriptions. And I don't get a free one. Um, so today we've invited back Travis Bembenek, the CEO and owner of Mexico News Daily. Travis and his lovely wife Tamarin have built one of the leading English news outlets here in Mexico. Their team delivers accurate and insightful reporting. He's a trusted voice on Mexican political, economic, and cultural affairs. Please help me in welcoming Travis. Again, he was here in March, did a wonderful presentation, and we expect another one.
And thank you to so many of you for being subscribers and readers of Mexico News Daily. I really appreciate that. I'm just going to start with about a 1 minute sort of who we are. For those of you that aren't aware of us yet, and then I'm going to jump into what hopefully is a fun, interactive, enlightening, educational analysis, really, of Mexico's new president, Claudia Sheinbaum. Okay, so see if this works. It's not. I'm hitting the third button. Let's see. Sorry. There we go. Okay. All right. So as Ron said, my wife and I are the owners of Mexico News Daily. We bought it about 2 years ago from a Canadian who had had it for 8 years. And really our motivation behind it was a couple things. One was a lot of frustration with what the media has done, I think, to our society. In a lot of ways, it hasn't contributed, as some of those great quotes implied, to better understanding and more enlightenment, but rather more anger, more frustration, more polarization. And we thought, how could we be a part of something that helped solve that or helped not do that? The second thing was really a love for Mexico and an appreciation for the country and its people. And really the third thing was the fact that we've been frustrated for many years about how the media covers Mexico. I'm sure many of you have felt that as well. International media, 9 times out of 10, if not 99 times out of 100, when it writes about Mexico, it tends to be negative, right? And there are unfortunately some negative stories in the country. We cover those, but there's so many positive things going on as well. And we felt like the media wasn't covering those. And as a result, Mexico wasn't getting the appreciation it deserves, really. And that appreciation ultimately results in more investment, more tourism, more people coming here to live, which can bring a cycle of investment and growth. As we know, there's still a lot of areas in the country that have a lot of poverty. And I think a big way to improve that poverty is more investment, right? At the end of the day, private investment and people coming and spending money here makes a big impact. So just last comment on Mexico News Daily, you see me and my wife, but we're now over 50 people in 13, it says 12, but we just got another person in another state, 13 states of Mexico. We're in 6 countries. Our average writer has 20 years of experience. Our writers are from 5 different countries. So we're building quite a team to cover what's going on in the country. Okay, so let's jump into it and have some fun talking about Claudia Sheinbaum. Okay, one thing I've noticed, and I was just in Mexico City over the weekend taking a lot of Ubers, and one thing I do is ask every single one of them, what do you think of Claudia Sheinbaum? How do you think she's doing? And the answer is always sort of polarizing. They either love her or they can't stand her. And then when I ask follow-up questions, well, why do you feel that way? What is it that makes you love her or not like her? I don't get great answers, right? And so with that in mind, I wanted to provide, I guess, a framework to think about the situation she's in, the challenges she faces, to help you think about a little bit deeper than love her or don't love her, to really analyze how she's doing. So have any of you felt that when you ask your Mexican friends, does it feel like sort of one extreme or the other? And I challenge you, and hopefully after this presentation, you'll be able to challenge people and say, well, why is that? Because what about this issue? Don't you think she's doing a good job on this issue? Or don't you think she's not doing a good job on this issue? I think it's important to understand that context. And I just want to mention, I am not in any way during this presentation trying to be pro Claudia or against Claudia or pro Trump or against Trump or pro Trudeau or against Trudeau. I'm just presenting what's been happening in the news. Okay? So, I did have the pleasure to meet with her a couple months ago and spend some, just chatting with her a little bit, saw a presentation of her. I had gone in as a business person thinking, she's horrible for business and she's going to be, all of that's in quotes, by the way, and not going to be good for business or good for business people. I was very impressed with her presentation, shocked at how informed, direct, clear her communication was. But I think it's just important to remember how unique of a person she is. Her grandparents are both immigrants to Mexico from Europe. She has an undergraduate degree in physics, a master's in physics, and a PhD in energy engineering. PhD. She has authored over 100 articles, written 2 books on energy, the environment, and sustainable development. She completed her PhD at Berkeley and actually lived in California for 4 years. So that's an interesting data point if you think about Mexico's previous president, AMLO. He took pride in not traveling. He took pride in not really understanding or caring about other countries. And some would say, well, that's not bad because he was totally focused on Mexico. She does have a unique perspective. She has lived in the United States for years. She's married. She just got married a second time recently, a couple months ago. She has a daughter, a stepson. She's a grandmother. She was part of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change that won a Nobel Peace Prize. So she actually has a Nobel Peace Prize. She was the head of government. It's not the mayor because Mexico City is its own state, so it's the head of government for Mexico City. As we all know, she became Mexico's president October 1st, first woman president in the history of Mexico, first Jewish president in the history of Mexico. So really quite a fascinating background. So with that in mind, I want to present and I want to review with all of you what I'm calling the Claudia Sheinbaum case study, because I think, there's so much we learn reading books or case studies about historical figures or historical leaders, right? And there's so much in those readings that we can think and apply to our current day life. And in Claudia, we have a real life, quite fascinating case study in leadership that we're going to see playing out in real time. She has a lot of pressure on her just by being a woman, right? So many women really, truly are hoping for some real significant changes in the way presidents have run the country in the past. So that, to begin with, is a lot of pressure. The other thing, and this is not a commentary or opinions on the previous president. He did a lot of good things for the country, but there's some things as well that he left Ms. Sheinbaum in quite a difficult situation. So he did not invest in clean energy. He did significantly invest in the dirty energy Pemex energy company. Okay, now there were some good reasons for doing that, but he did not invest in clean energy. The country has increased its debt burden significantly over the past few years. Now, if you look at countries around the world, maybe that's not a big deal because everyone seems to be doing it. But at the end of the day, the debt burden did increase. which leaves her with less room to move on spending priorities. He invested billions and billions and billions in trains, specifically the Maya train, in airports. And some of those things have yet to have any real meaningful return or even have a return in the near term future. And one of the bigger things is, he embraced this strategy of hugs, not bullets, in dealing with the cartels. And of course, there's conflicting perspectives on if that's worked or not. I think if you look at the data, it has not worked. So, that situation has not, I think we can agree, significantly improved. So she has that situation as well. So let's walk through, let's imagine for a few moments we are President Sheinbaum, okay? You come in, you're ready to go, you have all this pressure, being the first female president, and then the first thing that happens is you have to make a decision of where you're going to live, which is something that most presidents don't have to deal with. But if any of you have been to Mexico City, the presidential residence since 1934 has been in Chapultepec Park, in like basically the White House, called Los Pinos. So every president's been staying at that house. It's sort of a perfect location because it has natural security because of the park and everything. AMLO said, no way, the president should not live in a mansion. So we're going to make this a building of the people, and moved his residence to literally just a couple rooms in the National Palace, which is on the Zocalo. Still a beautiful building. It's a big building, but many would argue it's not really an appropriate place to have a residence. It'd be like, having a residence in La Biblioteca or something, right? It's just kind of a strange place. So, again, for almost 100 years, the presidents lived there, and now your predecessor made this strange change, and she has to figure that out. So just think for a moment, what would you do if you were in that situation? And think about how the public would respond to what you do, right? Because if you just go back to what was the status quo for 100 years, a lot of people may think, oh, wow, she doesn't love the people anymore. She's not a person of the people. She's let power go to her head. So even what would be sort of not a decision that most presidents would have to face, she faced day one. A second sort of humorous one, you may have read that, again, the previous president, in sort of an alignment or messaging of being closer to the people of Mexico, actually sold the Mexican president's airplane. And I should have not put it up there and asked if anyone could guess, but the buyer was the president of Tajikistan. So Tajikistan is flying the Mexican president's airplane. They bought it. Actually, the president had a raffle for a little while and was going to raffle it off, but that didn't work very well. And so imagine, Ms. Sheinbaum just had a meeting that she was invited to, the G20 meeting in Rio de Janeiro last month. And she had to go, and AMLO took pride in basically not going to any international meetings. She wants to re-engage Mexico. What do? You don't have a plane, right? Do you, buy a new plane, call up Tajikistan and see if you can get it back? Do you fly commercial, business class, economy plus, economy? Do you start learning to love eVitobus? Do you get a Netflix account, or sorry, a NetJets account? What she actually did, and we covered it, and we had some pictures that were pretty fascinating. She flew commercial and she flew economy, which is, I don't know if it's crazy or if it's admirable, or safe. But again, put yourself in her shoes. If she would have contracted a plane, a lot of people would have complained and said so much for the campaign promises of being close to the people. Really, what should be not a decision a president has to deal with, was something, the optics matter, right? So she had to deal with this within the first few weeks of being president. We actually ran a picture in Mexico News Daily of her sitting in her seat in the plane, in economy. but it was in the exit row. And it was funny. Someone put in the comments, like, I wonder who paid for the exit row upgrade. And so I thought that was funny. But, everybody's a critic. And as sort of trivial as this may seem, it carries a lot of weight in terms of the optics, especially given what her predecessor had done. What would you do? Let's see, this quick raise of hands. Who would advocate saying we need to get a plane again? We need to get a presidential plane. Okay. Who would say let's keep flying commercial? Okay, good. Who would say commercial economy? Come on, that's just cruel. Come on. Keep in mind, Brazil is like a 10-hour flight from Mexico City. So, not easy. That's nothing for the compare. Yes. That's an interesting point. Obviously, the military has planes. She could have taken a military plane. She didn't do that. She didn't explain why. It definitely it won over a lot of hearts and minds flying economy, right? And I thought, I was totally skeptical about this because I've flown a lot in my life and it's not fun to fly long flights. And I thought, okay, she must have been whisked to the door and gone up the little, stairs. She went into the airport. She was standing in the line for the gate, just like everybody else. So, you could be cynical, as a lot of people are, that she did it just for the media. But at the end of the day, she did sit in economy for all those hours. So interesting. All right, moving along. Couple weeks into your new presidency, Trump wins, right? And says 25% tariffs on all Mexican products day one. Okay? Now, again, I'm not weighing in on if I think it's logical or credible or anything, but new president, first few weeks, Trump wins and makes a threat of something that would be absolutely crushing to Mexico's economy, right? What do you do? Put yourself in her shoes. What would you do? What would you say? What would you not do or say? Um, and we don't have time for me to get into exactly what she did in each of these cases. This is not a plug for Mexico News Daily, but this is the kind of stuff we cover each and every day. How does she handle these situations? And I think for those that have followed along, it's been damn impressive, I think, so far, how she's handled what are, quasi-existential threats to the economy, right? How she's handled and dealt with some of these threats. Again, I would love for us to have 2 hours and we could debate and talk about what she did and was it right, but we don't have time. So just think about it. Even how many Canadians do we have in the room today? Even Canadians who are stereotypically so nice, right? They don't pick fights with anybody. Immediately, again, a couple weeks into her term, a couple weeks, two different, they're called prime ministers of the provinces, right? Pick fights saying maybe NAFTA, the USMCA, should just become US and Canada. We should just cut out Mexico. So imagine that. Even you're thinking, okay, we have this threesome, US, Mexico, Canada. The US is being difficult, but we can at least count on Canada to be our friend. Nope, right? That didn't happen. And so, right away, the Ontario Prime Minister came out suggesting this. Then the Calgary, lives in Calgary, Prime Minister. So maybe we want to boycott Calgary. Just kidding. Um, came out and said the same thing. Now, Justin Trudeau did come out and say, we're better together, stronger. But, and this is not a political commentary or opinion, but most people say he's not going to be around within a few months, right? So she's going to have to deal with a new leader in Canada, potentially, who potentially is going to be throwing stones at Mexico as well. So it's quite fascinating, the pressure she's under from our friends in North America. Now, probably one of the stickiest issues that she's facing is that of Chinese investment into Mexico. Okay, I don't know, you don't see it so much in San Miguel, but when you go to the big cities, the amount of Chinese cars, Chinese car dealerships is mind-blowing. In the last month, I've been in the nicest mall in, don't ask me why, because I don't like shopping much, but I was in the nicest mall in Guadalajara and the nicest mall in Mexico City in the last month. And there's Chinese car exhibits. You know, these aren't, they are targeting them for, you know, the upper class. And so we cover it all the time. Chinese cars are pouring into Mexico. This year, there'll be almost 10% of the new cars sold in the country. Think of it from a non-political perspective. Non-politically, the Chinese cars are great cars by any measures. They're electric, so they're green. They're low cost. So why wouldn't you welcome them from a non-political perspective, right? Now, when you enter with the political dimension, the US is saying, we're not letting them in, and we don't want you to let them in, right? So she has this dilemma and this decision to make. Do you let in high quality, economical, green cars from China and potentially risk relationship issues or tariff threats from the US and Canada? Or do you stop these and just sort of say, okay, US, you tell me what I'm allowed to buy and sell in terms of cars? Tough decision, right? Really tough decision, especially since many of the Chinese car companies are saying they are willing to build plants here, right? So then you say, well, does it make it better if there's a plant here? The US and especially Trump has said absolutely zero Chinese technology. We don't even want Chinese cars made in Mexico. Again, I have very strong opinions on all of this, but I'm not going to share them here. I would be happy to outside of here. But if you think of that decision, good cars, good technology, green technology, low cost, which would be, they're great cars for, you know, emerging middle class, jobs, or give the US and Canada what they want, which is help protect their automotive industries. Tough decision, very tough decision. The cartel issue, right? I touched on it earlier. The hugs not bullets strategy hasn't worked. So just in summary, there's been sort of two schools of thoughts on how to take on the cartels. Head on with violence, or just kind of ignore it and just let them do their thing and hope that the majority of people aren't affected by it. You know, so those are sort of two very simplified schools of thought. The previous few presidents had taken a little bit more of an aggressive measure on the cartels. That didn't work. The previous president, AMLO, took a less aggressive stance. That didn't work. And so she has this dilemma, even forgetting about the US. Which strategy should she pursue? Then you add in the fact that the US, Ron DeSantis was the first one to do it when he was running for president, and now Trump has repeated it. If you don't get the job done, Mexico, we will get the job done, implying whatever that means, right? You know, so again, she has this decision even without the US saying that. Which strategy? Both of these have failed. Which one should we do? And then you add in, you know, the US saying, and if you don't do it, we're going to get it done. Or if you don't do it and get it done and show progress, we're going to put up tariffs, or we're going to build the wall. Or it's very, you know, what was a very, very complicated issue to begin with, the violence from the cartels, has just gotten much more difficult for her to navigate. Okay? We are covering some of the things she's doing. It's way too early to know, you know, if it's going to work or not. Migrants, right? Again, I'm not weighing in, so if I in any way insinuate an opinion, please don't take it that way. But under the previous or the current U.S. administration, Trump is acting like he's president already. Under the current U.S. administration, clearly many migrants came through Mexico into the U.S., right? That has gone down significantly over the last 6 to 9 months, perhaps corresponding with the election. Sorry for the personal commentary there. So it's gone way down. And yet still it was a huge issue during the US campaigns, right? And the US new administration coming in is saying, they're going to stop it. And they are saying, Mexico, you can and should and must help stop it. You can't anymore just say, look, they're just passing through. We're going to let them pass through. It's not our issue. The U.S. is making very clear that is not an option, right? And so Mexico has to face, it's easy. If you just look at this issue in isolation, you could say, well, Mexico can say, we're going to keep doing what we've always done. Just let them pass through. But now you have Trump threatening tariffs, Trump threatening deportations, Trump threatening other things if Mexico doesn't take action on issues like this. Okay? Very complicated issue as well. And there's been some interesting developments in this in just the last few weeks. We covered last week a migrant group of 5,000 people was coming from Central America, and Mexico stopped them. So, there are changes happening, and she is doing things that potentially would appease the northern neighbors. Yes? Mexico. I'm not sure exactly if they were returned back or if they were sort of stopped and held, because this just happened. It was like Thursday or Friday of last week. Just happened. What is interesting, if you haven't been to Mexico City recently, you see a lot of migrants now living in Mexico City. You see them, unfortunately, because you see a lot of them living in squalor, in like tent cities and things like that. I'm not trying to be depressing, by the way, with this presentation. Okay. I love trains. I think everybody loves trains. It's hard not to love trains, but at the end of the day, they have to make some sense, right? Logic, financially, and even if you put the financial side aside, people need to ride them, right? It can't just be like a vanity project. AMLO invested hugely in two major train projects in particular. One is the train Maya, which was basically the Yucatan Peninsula. Really a fascinating project connecting like 26 different ruins, lots of cities. We're going to see how this plays out. It could end up being, the biggest white elephant in the history of Mexico, or it could be one of the most, consequential investments in a historically very poor area of Mexico that brings jobs and opportunities to millions of people. We'll see. The other one that's interesting that I think is really kind of cool to follow. So the Maya train is much more of a tourist project. The other one is called it needs a better name, the train of the Isthmus de Tehuantepec, or the Trans-Peninsula train. And it basically goes from the Pacific coast to the Gulf, just a straight shot across Mexico. And the vision is that it is an alternative to the Panama Canal. Okay, it doesn't mean it's an equal alternative, but it is an option to the Panama Canal. You've probably read that there's been huge drought issues. The Panama Canal capacity is down significantly. So the timing of this is interesting. But basically a ship, and these can't be these mega Panamax ships. That's not for this yet. But a ship can come from Asia, unload its cars directly onto the train, 6 hours across the country, reload onto another ship and be on its way. So it is working now, actually. It's slowly starting up. The ports are being expanded. But Huge projects. The Mayan train project was more than double over its budget. But compared to like California's train, this thing was built in like 2 years. It was incredible. Over 1,000 miles of tracks, and I've been in that area many times. And when you see it, it's mind blowing what they've done. I mean, like if any of you have been to China when China was in the boom years, how you'd see them building things so quickly. Mexico has been doing that with these trains. But, Claudia has a lot of debt. The Maya train isn't even totally finished yet. The operational costs are huge. She's got to figure out, is this real or not? Because it's going to require billions and billions of dollars of continued investment. Okay? So I will preview. Ironically, she has chosen option C. She's doubled down with even more train projects, significant ones. I'm not sure if you've read, but there's going to be a train from Mexico City to Querétaro. And the idea is it will be done within about 2 years. Very, very, very needed if you've ever driven on that road. So conceptually, it's a wonderful idea, but it has to make sense, right? A lot of times we see in the US like grand ideas of trains, but if you have to drive, a half an hour to get to the train station and it doesn't take you to the center of the city, it's not like a train in Europe, unfortunately. We'll see if Mexico does a better job at that. Okay, just a couple more. Pemex, we don't see it as much now because it's 2 presidencies ago, they privatized the filling up portion. That's why you see mobile gas stations or total gas. The government, to try to help with the Pemex problem, privatized the actual stations, but they didn't privatize the extraction or the refining. That's the part that doesn't make any money, and that's the part that has tons of, labor costs and huge debt. So the Mexican government still has that. And I mean, Pemex is a total disaster on any metric, production, efficiency, pension costs versus revenue. It's an absolute disaster. It just continues to be a thing that's, kicked down the road and not solved. It's getting to the point the debt just crossed $100 billion, $100 billion in one company. And so what it means is the government has to just keep constantly what was always in Mexico, a cash generator, right? That's why it was held under state control. It was paying basically a dividend to the country to invest in other areas. It's now a cost. So Mexican taxpayers have to send money to Pemex to keep it going, which is kind of crazy, and has to be solved sooner or later. We'll see what she does. And, one of the newer issues that's come up just in the past few weeks is the issue of deportations from the United States has gone from something, again, I'm injecting a little opinion here perhaps, something that was probably incomprehensible 3-6 months ago to something that seems to be gaining momentum, right? And so President Sheinbaum has to think, okay, the latest number I saw, I was looking last night, there's 4.1 million undocumented Mexicans in the United States. There's 10 million total, 4 million are Mexican. If you're Claudia Sheinbaum, I mean, that's 3.5% of the Mexican population. So do you plan for none? Do you plan for 100,000? Do you plan for 1 million? Do you plan for 4 million? Because it could happen, right? Again, if you set aside good, bad, horrible, great, that's a major project for the Mexican government as well to potentially receive and integrate all of these people, right? We're talking 25 San Miguel de Allende's of people, right? So, kind of mind-blowing to think of that challenge if it becomes reality. So, my last slide. It's truly, and I'm a geek when it comes to case studies and leadership and sort of who's done what and well or not well in the past. We are seeing one in real time right before our eyes that is about as fascinating as you can get. I would bet 20, 40, 60 years from now, there's going to be a lot of books on what she is facing and how she deals with it. So I guess I am, believe it or not, a very, very, very positive person. I'm an optimistic person. I'm super optimistic about how stay informed, stay positive, stay educated, and perhaps most importantly, help educate others, right? Because there's so much ignorance, really, on, on both sides of the border. And so I think being informed is important. And, a little plug for Mexico News Daily. We are not political. Anyone to read us, and I would bet you cannot guess if we're pro-Trump, anti-Trump, pro-Claudia, anti-Claudia. What we say is we try to help you think about how to think, not what to think, right? So much of the media is like, you need to think this person's horrible. And we don't think that way. We're just like, here's the news as best and impartial as we can tell it, and you decide. Okay? So, questions? Thank you.
Thank
Sorry
you
I
so
didn't
much.
leave a lot
We
of
do have
time
a
for
couple
questions.
minutes for a couple of questions, and I'm
Sorry I
going to
didn't leave more
apologize
time
ahead
for
of
questions.
AMLO pulled a lot of money out of culture and the arts. Do you have any sense of what her position on that is?
Culture, arts, tourism were three big ones that he pulled out of. I have not heard her commenting on that yet. Um, the big question is sort of where's the money going to come from, right? And so, no, I have not heard specifically in those. I mean, AMLO did pull out of that to fund other things, and I haven't heard, sort of concrete. Of course, she talks about the importance of those areas, but nothing concrete yet. Should we just go like rapid fire question? I can stay for more
There's a
time.
microphone. So, thanks for the great talk. I'm wondering regarding your first multiple choice, where is she living now? And then with that, and also with like the flying economy, it seems like security seems more lax than I would have thought. What do you have to say with regards to her
She has
security?
chosen to stay in the National Palace. She just remodeled it a little bit. She created this cool little video where she said, I gave it a woman's touch, and she put a bunch of paintings of famous Mexican women in history in the in her it's basically like a room. I mean, it is not meant to be a place to live. If anyone has ever read the book, and if you haven't, I highly recommend it, The Last Emperor of Mexico. And it talks about Maximilian and Carlota coming from Europe and basically coming to Mexico and saying, we're going to act like we're the leaders and see if it sticks. It's a fascinating, fascinating book. And just the reason I bring it up is they were going to live in the National Palace. And the book actually says there were so many rats and everything in there that they slept on tables. And then they moved to Chapultepec Castle. If any of you have seen that castle, that was, sort of prettied up during that time period. Regarding security, I think not much is being done. When I talk to business leaders constantly, and you'll probably be surprised to hear this, of course they say politically they're concerned about that. That's not really top of mind for them. They're worried about energy, green energy. They're worried about water. They're worried about infrastructure. They're worried about education. And the fifth is security. But in a long conversation with them, unfortunately, everyone's just sort of learned to deal with the situation that exists today, right? So, what will she do? I don't know, because everyone's sort of figured out, right? Obviously, that's not a good thing to just sort of accept the levels of horrible violence, but there's sort of, found a point where it works, right, for them in business.
Well,
Sorry, I didn't leave more time. I'm sorry.
w-
Go ahead.
one big issue that was skipped here was the legal certainty. How long takes to collect or to collect debt or a credit here in Mexico? And now with all the lack of legal certainty that are coming with the Reforma Judicial.
I
I guess
deliberately left that out because it's a very complicated issue. The Reforma Judicial, judicial reform, you know, it's something worth studying and learning, but it's complicated. And I've asked probably 200 people for an opinion on it, and people can't give me a great answer why what has just been done is so much worse. The current system is not working judicially. And so those that argue the new reform, and it's too complicated to get into here, but those that say, you know, oh, this is going to be horrible, it's already horrible, the judicial system in Mexico in many ways. So that's why I didn't get into it, because it's a little bit of a pozo sin fondo. I mean, it's a hole without a bottom, because just nobody can agree on that issue. It's either horrible and going to be, you know, the demise of the country, or no big deal. It's literally that extreme of opinions. Do you want to, this, one more?
There's this whole new economic group of people that have started to migrate around the world, of digital nomads. Okay, that's different from tourism, but it's a growth that's happening. Is there any plans to address it? Because they would be temporary immigrants that come in and out all the time. They're not going to get permanent residence. And it is a source of money, but it's also a source of politics as well.
I think President Sheinbaum was the leader of Mexico City. She saw the, I guess I'd say, good and bad of the digital nomad boom coming to Mexico City. There's a lot of good that comes out of it. If you talk to people in Mexico City, a lot of people say this has been wonderful for the city. Now, if you've been gentrified out of your neighborhood, you don't feel that way. But the way I look at that issue a little bit is that is happening everywhere. It's not good, but it's happening everywhere. It's happening in San Miguel de Allende. So I think the digital nomads have just sort of added even more pressure on this gentrification globally type issue, but they're not to be blamed. I don't think they shouldn't be demonized. They're no different than any of us living in San Miguel de Allende at the end of the day. So, okay, thank you.